Today, I sit down with a successful podcaster slash vodcaster, a man who's written 4 books on business, been featured by Fox News, and his podcast was featured in an article on entrepreneur.com. He's part of ICON, the Independent Podcasters Conference, and is always looking to help others succeed. I'm sure he's not done either. So, let's get the conversation going with Joe Pardo. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining me. It's such an honor to have you on to get interviewed and to talk about vodcasting and podcasting and just talking shop. You know?
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. It's always fun to talk this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
110%.
It's for me. It's almost like, you know, once I start talking about podcasting and vodcasting, I can't stop. You know, like I even talk to my wife and, you know, I tell her about all these things that is going on. And she just nods me to death. Like, yeah, okay. You know, like, but I love it. I love talking shop.
Well, that's good. You gotta be passionate about the thing that you're bringing to the table here.
Yes. So right off the bat, because I was looking into a lot of the things that you do, and I want to go through a list of things that I put down that you're involved with, which you must be a very busy man. So you have
a little bit.
You have the Super Joe Pardo podcast / Vodcast. You have the business lessons on YouTube. You have Facebook live shows. You have ICON, the Independent Podcasters Conference. You have the Indie Pod podcast. You write books. You have about 4 books out. You're a public speaker. Your podcast, Dreamers Podcast, was featured in an article on entrepreneur.com. And Fox News put your book, Joe Pardo's 31 Life-Changing Concepts, on their 6 books that will transform your mindset about how to grow your business list. And I'm sure that there's more, but I mean, wow.
Well, you did your research, so thank you for that. Taking the time to learn, to do all that. And I actually forgot about some of that stuff because it's been a long 6 years, 6.5 years at this point, of building and growing and bringing, people together. I'm very happy with the way this journey has panned out, and the people that, that's always the number one thing, is like the people. And if that's not the number one thing to you, then you might want to find something else to do, because podcasting, it connects you with so many incredible people. It gives you a reason to talk to people you would have no reason to talk to otherwise.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I can't, even last year, because I've only been podcasting for a year, so last year, before I even started, I never thought I'd be in front of a camera, let alone, recording my voice on a podcast, or talking to people. It's just like, it is amazing the different kind of people you get to talk to doing this kind of thing.
It is. People, I didn't have friends. I had some friends, like in other parts of the world, but then after this, after podcasting, I literally have friends on almost every continent on the planet. So it's incredible. Like, it's incredible. It's a crazy conductor for people to bring them together and have a really great time and learn from each other and all of that. And I'm really happy that I had all the skill set to be able to bring that together over the years and get better at it. Obviously, I didn't start out great, so I'm still learning. Still getting there. I promise. I will get better. But it's a process, and you only figure that out as you get through the process yourself, and learn.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've watched your vodcasts, and I've listened to your podcast episodes. Specifically Emily Prokop, when you were at PodCon, your interview.
DC Podfest, yeah, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. And
I remember this stuff. I remember.
And your most recent one, that was a great video too. So if anybody is not following Joe on YouTube, head on over to YouTube and give a search, The Joe Pardo Show. If you're podcasting, you're not going to want to miss it. So
thank you.
Your podcast is called The Joe Pardo Show, and
yes,
I'm gonna read a little bit from the description just to tell people really what it's about. So learn business lessons from Joe Pardo and his world-class network of leaders in industries from across the planet. Inspiration to help you build your business for your lifestyle instead of your lifestyle for your business. He has intriguing professional guests. And if you want to hear more about the business side of podcasting, you're going to want to subscribe to his show. Not only is it available on all major platforms, but it's also available on his YouTube channel and his official website. After this, all the links to everything Joe does will be in the show notes, so everybody can definitely check you out.
It's a good place for it.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, because I wanted to really get into talking about vodcasting with you, and but I kind of almost wanted to go back to the beginning, because I was reading your bio on your website, and you had worked previously with your family's business. What made you take that step from leaving your family business to actually starting this journey that you're on?
Yeah. So leaving the family business was about a 3-4 year journey in and of itself, thinking over the consequences and everything that went along with it, growing up in that business since I was 6. And, it was a very difficult decision to make. And it took, like I said, literally years of going back and forth. And finally in summer of 2013, I was actually helping one of my best friends move out of his houses. I've done like too many times for all of my friends. The one that gets asked a lot. And I appreciate the fact that they appreciate that I'm there and able to help. But, so I actually didn't have a car, because I left my car at the shop. I took one of our giant box trucks so I could help my friend, one of my best friends growing up, like moved to New York. And I borrowed our other friends, who's like a brother to me as well, borrowed his car, drove over to my dad's house, and was like, yeah, I think I'm going to leave probably by the end of the year. It's August now, and he's like, okay, well, what do you think you're gonna do then? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know yet. I was like, I re-enrolled back in the school, because I don't have a degree or anything like that. So I'm like, all right, let me go back to school, and kind of maybe start to try to figure this thing out here, because like I'm not, I just wasn't happy. I was very burnt out. Yeah. I didn't feel I was making enough impact. I didn't feel I was appreciated enough for what I was bringing to the table, from a tech and from a operational standpoint. And I was like, I need to get out of here. So I started going back to school. January 1st came and went. Still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was only doing like 2 classes at a time per semester. So it was like it was going to take me forever to get an associate's degree. I mean, like legit, like 2 years legit, like 5 years, 6 years to get like a 2-year degree. It was not going to be any kind of sprint to anything like that. And I still didn't even know what I really wanted it for. Right. So it was like a couple months go by, and things at this point were pretty toxic. Like I was not talking to my dad much. Like he would walk by my office, and like I just would like keep my head down, because I'm like, I don't really want to talk about this stuff. I just, it's just not good. It was really a not good time for me, for him, for probably some of the people around us. It was not good. So ultimately, it ended in a fist fight between me and him on April 2nd, and I called it. Of course, I called it. I could, I was talking to my office mate, and I'm like, he's like, all right, well, you gonna have a good night? And I'm like, yeah, this is gonna end in a fight. Like, cause we had a little exchange prior. I was like, this is gonna end in a big fight. And then like, of course it did. It ended in a fist fight. Everybody was gone at the time already. So it was not like there was people there, but of course when they come in the morning, there's like a hole in the wall, and there's like a keyboard smashed, and like it, they're like, what the heck happened here? Like, why? What happened, right? So of course I left there after that argument and that fight, and I had to go take a test at school. So like like I'm all like crying, and just like, I don't even want to be here. I can't think straight. Like I'm done. I'm not going back there. And I just still like really did not know what I wanted to do or what it looked like yet. So I knew I wanted to have more impact in the world. I knew that I wanted to do something that, brought me more joy, whether that was like, at the time it was like DJing, like you say, I have my turntables here behind me. I had just released my first DJ album, and it was like,
Nice.
things. Yeah, so like things were kind of moving in that direction, but then I'm like, it's really hard to promote, DJing because like the whole copyrighted music thing. So like I wasn't like blissfully ignorant to like the fact that it's a really hard gig. And I had already gotten married at that point 2 years earlier, and I'm like, doing the whole DJing thing, like that means I got to be at clubs all night, and I don't really want to do that anymore. Like I was doing that 10 years earlier when I was a kid, so I was like, all right, I need to figure something out. So a month later, I'm on a plane to Disney World, and I was going to go run a 5K with my friend, and the album had just come out like a few weeks earlier, and I was going over all these Disney podcasts because it's Disney music mashed up with hip hop instrumentals to tell the story of Pixar's Up, like the movie Up. Yeah, so it's awesome. It's legitimately like an awesome. Yeah, well, if you go on my website, I might have got rid of that page. You might not be able to find that page at the moment. Yeah, it looks like you can't find that page. I'll get it over to you, man. Awesome. It's called Adventuratorium, and we raised money for Give Kids the World we did a CD release of it, which of course in 2014 was like a terrible time to release CDs because CDs were starting to like legit be dead at that point.
It's all digital now.
So it was like, all right, I should have like did like thumbsticks or something, with the album on it. But at that point, it was still too expensive to do. Like it was like still too expensive for that, but it was tough. So anyway. It's like, have you heard of this show called like Entrepreneur on Fire? And this is in 2014. So early 2014. So they were still relatively new doing their thing. And I was like, no, I was like, why? What is it all about? He's like, oh, they just interview entrepreneurs. And I was like, I didn't think about a show that just interviews people. Like they never, like I was trying to get on like roundtable discussions about Disney and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, well, it was like, I know a ton of people in business. Like I could totally do this. I've been around in business all my life. Mm-hmm. Well, I was like, but I know a lot more people that are living their dreams. So I started writing down names of people I would want to have on this show, and ultimately it was like hey, like this could help me figure out what the heck I want to do because I don't really know, but I know a lot of awesome people doing really cool things on their own. So the plane lands, I registered the domain name, the Twitter handle, the Facebook page before we get to the rental car, and I reached out to my man Al Kessel, who is a professional voice actor who I was just on his Disney show like a couple weeks earlier. And really hit it off with him. And I was like, hey, I want to do this. Like, I need a couple of pointers. Like, I already know tech. I know audio. Mm-hmm. What am I missing? He gave me the hookup. And then he was my first guest on the show. And 2 weeks after that plane ride, I had my first episode of the Dreamers podcast out, then went to 3 days a week the following week. So I was like, I started interviewing as many people as I possibly could, telling all these stories and things. Cause I'm like, I want to get good at this, and I'm having a lot of fun. I'm having great conversations. I'm making friends, deeper connections with friends, as well as friends like all over the place. I was like, all right, we're going to go 3 days a week. And then about 4 weeks or so into it, 5 weeks into it, I moved to 5 days a week. So I was like, what the heck? What's 2 more episodes a week anyway? And we were hitting iTunes New and Noteworthy when that was a thing. So like we're pulling in all these downloads. I'm like, hey, like let's keep this party rolling. Of course, after the iTunes New and Noteworthy train ended, the party came back down to earth. Yeah. To something a little more realistic. So, right. So I was like, okay, so I'm not going to be a literal overnight success, but we're going to get there anyway, right? And over the next couple months, I figured out like what I wanted it to look like. Like, okay, I'm going to speak. I'm going to produce this podcast. I'm going to write books and coach, right? So like those are the 4 things that I'm going to do. And originally, it wasn't really about business, but as time went on, it really, most of my guests became business guests or business oriented guests. So it became like Dreamers Podcast, business lessons from those that live their dreams. And eventually after winning the 2017 podcast awards, I switched over to Business with Super Joe Pardo. And it was the name for 2 years. And then I've recently switched it back over to the Joe Pardo Show, which I saw the cover art. I literally just updated the cover art like yesterday, I think. So probably after you've already pulled it, it just because it's saying so you're like, oh, it's the Joe Pardo Show. It's like the cover art says the Super Joe Pardo Show. So so I just recently literally like in the last week or so, deciding to switch the branding back to like just Joe Pardo and all that, because while like people call me that, and I greatly appreciate the nickname and the appreciation for the hustle and the inspiration that I bring to other people, because it's all about bringing up other people, right, and getting them hyped up to bring the super out of themselves. Not everybody gets that, right? And people like to judge book by cover, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. All these old sayings. And so I'm like, I'm gonna give it a shot in the arm, give it a change, and see what happens. So yeah, that's to explain like the difference there in between the Super Joe Pardo and Joe Pardo thing. It's so it's a work in progress, but it's one that I feel really, really good about. Actually, it feels like a weight is off my chest.
I mean, if you ask me, it sounds like you did great.
Yeah.
The show was on, like you said, Apple. It's new and noteworthy, but
well, that was when it was just the Dreamers podcast, and I was still just Joe Pardo. So it wouldn't be till about almost 3 years later that or I guess about 2 years later, I found, or 2 years later, I was cleaning out my desk. It was like a year later, I was cleaning out my desk, found that piece of paper that's on my about page that explains like where did that name come from,
the drawing,
and the drawing from Matt, whose car I borrowed to go to my dad's house and tell him that I wasn't, that I wasn't interested in being a part of the company anymore, long term, and so I don't know, So it wasn't until 2017 I switched everything over to Super Joe Pardo, and I became the brand. That was like early 2017. So it was, it's always a process. In fact, this upcoming week I'll be speaking on the Business Geeks podcast that I'm also on with my two wonderful co-hosts. They this upcoming week we're going to be talking about rebranding, because like I've done it. This will be my fourth time rebranding since starting. Not just that, but also like the shirt I'm wearing, the indie podcast, indie icon was originally Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. So so there's lots of changes. It's always good to be looking at the next thing, the next direction.
Right. So how long after you started your podcast did you make the move into vodcasting, into video? Did you go directly into just making YouTube content, or did you actually do live shows?
No, so what I did was when Facebook, actually before Facebook Live, when Twitter, what's the Twitter thing? Periscope and Meerkat. So I did Meerkat for like a real little bit of time, but Periscope, like I was doing Periscope out of the gate. And then once Facebook Live came on, I was doing Facebook Lives from my phone because I had an iPhone. So that at the time, like that was the only way to do it from your phone. So I would set my phone up, and me and Matt actually would do a pre-show for the Dreamers podcast where we would just talk about like current events and things of that nature. And I would do it on there. And now all these years later, because that was in like 2015. So now I'm getting these videos from 16 where like I'm holding like my daughter like while I'm recording these videos. I wasn't really recording video. I was basically just like turning on the camera while we're having this conversation in the same room, right? Yeah. It was cool that now I'm seeing these videos of like me holding Ava in my arms while I'm like recording these pre-shows. And before that, I was using YouTube to do live streaming on YouTube, to like Google Hangouts and things of that nature. And there was Blab. When was Blab a thing? Was that in 2015, 2014? Blab was 2015. It launched in early 2015. So that I mean, you could go back to that and utilizing that for recording episodes, and we would do stuff for like Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference and stuff like that. So like, and even before that, like I remember in 2010, 2011, we were doing like Google Hangouts and stuff there. So the first anniversary of the Dreamers podcast, we held a house party, and we had it here actually literally here in this garage before it was looking like this. It didn't look like this
Oh,
literally before this year. I gutted the whole thing and did it all with a friend of mine
well, it looks great.
because we were both, yeah, well, it was COVID. So thank you, COVID. I appreciate it. Gave me a lot more space to utilize in my studio here. So we held this house party and we played minute to win it games for charity for Give Kids the World. So every time somebody would compete or complete a minute to win it game, I would donate $10. But then everybody else, like whether we were like online, people watching online at home, or like one of the 30 people that were here at the house would be like, oh, I'll donate, I'll throw in $10 too if they can play in 10, 10, and 10. Before you know it, we raised like $1,000 in like 3 hours.
Wow.
So it was awesome. Yeah, it was great.
That's
it was
great.
phenomenal. Yeah, and we had a cake, and there's pictures and all that. So it was a really magical time for the live streaming aspect, as well as being here and getting to experience all that.
Yeah.
So that's like the earliest, like I guess like the end of 2014 into 2015 was when I was putting all that together. Because I think I did a party. Even before that, though, I think in 2014, I had done some live streaming with YouTube celebrating the launch of Adventuratorium. We did a house party here. I don't think it was at the 1 year anniversary. It must have been, I think it was like in August. So it was a handful of months after it had come out, because it came out on April 14th on 2014. And we held the party in the summertime. We had like a bunch of people here and live streamed a live version of the event. Of the mix. I did like a set just for that.
So I talk to a lot of new podcasters who are afraid to get in front of the camera, right? They're afraid to make that jump to live streaming. Were you ever like that? Were you ever camera shy?
No, I wasn't camera shy. I'll tell like the closest thing to camera shy I would say is like pulling out my vlogging rig in like a public place and like sitting there and like talking into it, like that kind of thing.
Right.
It never gets easier. You just get better at doing it, and the less time you do it, the more awkward it gets, until you just keep doing it, and then you just get used to being awkward about it.
Right. I mean, that's what I've been telling everybody, is that you just have to make a step into it. Just do it. Just keep doing it.
Yeah.
And just make it a routine.
Yeah, it's definitely a muscle. You gotta get used to getting in front of the camera, looking at the camera as much as possible, being energetic, or like, picking up things and like using your hands and, using that medium. So like, and part of using that medium is also knowing what's in your background, right? And like kind of controlling, like right now, my camera quality looks like crap because I'm using a webcam, which I have a DSLR literally sitting next to it, but apparently I couldn't switch to it in the software. So, which is a shame, because the software looks awesome. Like this looks phenomenal. Like I love the layout, and this is, aesthetics wise, give it A+. But because I can't switch my camera, my camera looks like not great. So, but at least we got this to work. So at least I'm not in video.
Okay, so that brings me to my next point, is that what I like to tell a lot of new vodcasters is that use whatever you have. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, on a new camera or all this fancy equipment to create a vodcast. Like you said earlier, using your cell phone. Like I totally promote people going live, creating video content, specifically on their phone when they're starting out. So
I still use my phone now 2 days a week in the indie pod community to go live. So because I don't have to come into my office, I don't turn my camera on, I don't have to turn my lights on, I don't have to boot into this the software that I use. Like I just pull out my phone. I already have like what the day of the week the message says, so it's just in like #SOS, bam, it's done, hit live. All of a sudden, like I'm going live and I'm talking about what's up. So for me, I always like to say, like, don't let the tech get in the way, right? Like go with the easiest, whatever's the easiest for you to use. Start with that, go with that until you get comfortable enough to like incrementally move towards something that, looks better. I mean, not everyone has to get a DSLR camera. I just happen to have two of them here for the TV show we were shooting last year. So like
Wow.
because I have it, like, and it's just sitting here gathering dust.
Yeah.
Yeah. You I guess you probably didn't even see that because like it's not even really on the site at the moment. That we shot a TV show last year called The Top with Super Joe Pardo.
I think I
Probably
seen something
soon to
about
be
that on
rebranded.
YouTube. Yeah, I think I seen some of
Oh,
that on
there you.
YouTube.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the first episode. I think is like when you click in the episode, like the first thing you see.
Right.
Yeah. So we shot that. So I wasn't utilizing the camera. So it just was like, well, I can plug it in via USB. I don't have to buy any extra equipment. Like I don't have to get any extra dongles or anything. I just plug it straight into the computer and like, bam! All of a sudden, I have this really great looking webcam that elevates everything about what I'm doing, especially considering that a lot of what I do is in the live streaming space with in regard to Indie Pod Daily specifically. When you're talking to people about podcasting and stuff, it's probably a good idea to have a good looking backdrop, a good looking camera setup,
Right.
Look, do I need this microphone here in front of me? No, I don't need this microphone in front of me, but it helps isolate some of the sound. Like there's a fan blowing off the side. There's an air conditioner behind me. And it also looks the part. So,
Sure.
the
microphone, the boom arm.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like, is it nice? It's nice to have. It's not something that you absolutely need. In some ways, I'd rather just use like Audio Technica ATR 2100 plugged in USB because I don't have to turn on my mixer and do all these other things. Like it's just on. It just works. Like it's just there. But it's also somewhat for the look and for the noise isolation.
Right. Yeah. So you touched a little bit on how this whole quarantine forced you into a studio remodel. How else has it impacted your vodcast?
It very positively. So Indie Pod Daily prior to September 2019, the show was called the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference Podcast because we couldn't have the word podcast in it enough. And right, it's got So it turned into the Indie Pod Daily show once COVID hit, I started to do these virtual conferences inside of our community, which grew our community exponentially. Like we're almost at 5 times growth in a year, which
great.
Is incredible. Yeah, no, it is. It's super fortunate and appreciate and love everybody there. I don't want to start naming names because then I feel bad. So like, who you are. I appreciate you. I love you. But I'm not going to name names because I ain't going down that road. So for everybody else's sake, for everybody listening and watching. Once we started to have that kind of level of success with these virtual conferences inside our community, I was like, well, I should take advantage. It's like I was already doing a show, a weekly show on Wednesday nights at 8:00 called the Independent, I don't know, whatever it was called, Indie Pod Show or something. So I moved it to daily for a while, for I don't know, a couple of months because it just seemed like every day like there was more and more people watching and interacting and all that stuff. So like I still try to go daily, but pretty much at this point I'm absolutely going live Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So at least 5 days a week, Mondays and Tuesdays. I'm probably going to reinvent because Mondays is Motivational Monday and Tuesdays is Tech Tuesday.
Okay.
The Tech Tuesday thing, like, I was doing these reviews of these products, but then people kept coming in the chat and being like, "What camera are you using? What lens is on that camera?" And it's like, well, I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about this other thing here today. So so it's just like, all right, well, and how many things could I possibly? I mean, I have a ton of tech around the house, but like, in relation to podcasting and video, to a certain extent, like how much stuff could I, and I'm not just going to buy stuff for the sake of like, oh, I can review this. Like that's
right.
I got enough stuff. Unless I'm actively going to put it into my setup, I don't need to be buying more stuff just to sit on the sidelines.
Absolutely.
So, right. Yeah. So I was like, okay, how do I do it? So, so lately what I've been doing is instead of doing reviews, I was doing like bringing call for help back with Leo Laporte. Right. And like doing, like, how can I help you with your tech on Tuesday? Or or like today was like, hey, how did you, I just put a question into the group, like, what was your fear of tech and how did you overcome it? So to get people to inspire other people to be like, well, look, this person like would touch a computer and it would shut off. Like, how do I overcome my fear of tech and all that? So like things like that. And then like Motivational Monday, trying to pull stories out of other people, like to inspire our community and things of that nature. So I'm trying to work on it. Like I want to be live in there every day, and I want to create the episodes every day because they go into our catalog on the website. Mm-hmm. But to a certain extent, like I'm also trying to push a lot of boulders at once. So it's like, okay, so like I'm trying to do a lot of writing, maybe for another book at some point. But right now it's like all about like getting things straightened out, especially since I've worked so hard to like get this all straightened out, like trying to play catch up and all those days where they were really long days. Like Mike would get here at like 9 a.m. and then he would leave by like 4 or 5. And of course it wouldn't be done. He would end up coming back the next day on Thursday. Right. But in the meantime, I'm like, well, I got another live stream I got to do tonight. So like, I got to put the room back together enough. So like, I'm like, vacuuming like crazy and like sweeping things out the door. And I'm like, man, I should have waited to put the carpet down, because now like I didn't realize I put the carpet down and I was like, oh, maybe we should put, drywall on the walls and, put a doorway here where there was a window, and so we can get in the other garage, and like all these like things. It's just like adds up. Running network cable across the attic, and it's like all these little things just take so much time, but it's so worth it because like once it's together, it's together.
Sure.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, it does.
So for me, COVID has been great. It's devastating that so many people have lost their lives. It's devastating that so many people have lost their businesses. But for me personally, it has been a mostly positive thing. I've gotten to spend every day home with the family, and I get to see my kids. It's actually incredible that my kids haven't come running through this door behind me, come up and say hi. So it's just things like that.
That's okay. I'm surprised you're not hearing my kids run around upstairs. So.
Oh, I just noticed your sign says no whining. That's awesome.
Yeah. But so what do you think is your most favorite episode of your show that you did? What would be your favorite episode? Do you have one? That's so hard. Because like, especially if you're talking about like any of the interviews and stuff, because it's like I'm picking people. Oh, it's like asking who's your favorite kid? Who's your favorite kid, man? Yeah, true. Okay, well then let's move on to this one. How about are you one of those guys to be obsessed with your stats? Define obsessed. Like what level of so do like, you constantly have a web browser open on your phone, constantly refreshing the stats?
So this is one of my screens, is the analytics for IndiePod.
Nice.
Which is kind of embarrassing that no one's been on it apparently in the last half hour. But I promise you that it's getting hits throughout the day. Okay. So it just is a shame that like right in the moment it didn't, there wasn't people in there. But but it's so I use that because like when I'm live streaming, I want to know, like, are people going to the site? Like, is it working what I'm saying, and things like that. So it's helpful. It's actually running on a separate, like I have 2 computers in front of me. So it's running on a separate computer that also runs my security cameras as well. So it's like, but it's a dedicated screen to just Google Analytics for IndiePod. Though I was splitting it for a while to the joepardo.com as well, just to see like what pages are people going to, how is the traffic like in real time. Right. Yeah. So I'd like to clarify this. Am I obsessed? Maybe a little bit.
I'd like to clarify this a little bit because I'm always telling new podcasters to not worry too much on their stats, okay? Because I'm trying to encourage people to just create content, to just make content, because they enjoy it. not because they want to get the hits, not because they want to, grow the show to 1,000 downloads per episode, So, so I'm constantly telling them, don't worry about your statistics. But in your case, you have so many other things that rely on your statistics that you do constantly have to check those and monitor them.
I mean, realistically, I do check probably every
hour,
every day, every other day. Nah, not every day. If that's the benchmark for being upset, like I'm checking, I'm literally looking at them right now for the downloads. But if that's the benchmark for being obsessed, like the podcast downloads, I don't look at every single day.
Okay.
No, I look more at the Google Analytics. I want to see where people are going, how many people are hitting up the site, things like that. I think are a little more relevant. I think when it comes to podcasting numbers, they don't really matter unless you're trying to get a sponsorship deal,
right?
Or looking at them like once a month or once every couple of weeks, just to look back and say like, oh, this episode like really hit really hard. Or like when you're looking back and you're like, all right, I don't have an episode for this week. What should I talk about? Like, go back and look at your stats and you say, oh, wow, look at this episode. Well, can I do a derivative of this topic and go here with it, right? Mm-hmm. So things like that, I would be looking at it more like that than like worried about, because like I see the posts, people, I got 100,000 downloads, or we hit 500,000 downloads, or here's the thing, right? And this is as a podcaster / entrepreneur / podcasting conference person. If you and I are having a conversation and like you're like, oh, I really want to come and speak at like Indie Pod, right? And I want to be involved. And the first thing you're like, I have 500,000 listeners and this, that, and the third. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? Right. It's not going to change my opinion of you, or like it's not going to change anything like that. And maybe that's just me, right? Looking at, I want to know the person, right? I don't care how many downloads you have. That's cool, right? But that's a metric, right? Like one of my friends, I'm trying to think of who it was at this point, but I'm pretty sure it was a she, and I mentioned something about stat numbers, and she was like, stop it. She's like, stop, Joe, stop. And I was like, well, what? She's like, because you're like measuring somebody's worth by how many numbers that they have, attributed to their to them, mm-hmm. Right? Like when you say, oh, meet blah blah blah, who has 3 million subscribers on YouTube, but it's like, okay, like what does ultimately, you know what that means? There's just a fraction of a fraction of people who have already heard of you by the time they actually find your content, mm-hmm. or not find your content, but you know what I'm saying? Like you could have 10 million followers on, subscribers on YouTube. Doesn't really mean anything, because there's still going to be a number of people that are going to find you eventually that have still never heard of you.
Exactly. New people find my show every day, so it's
ding ding, exactly. So it's really about the people, and even like when we have sponsors and stuff for like Indie Pod Daily and the conference and stuff, like they seem to really fall in love with this idea that like I know most of the people in the community, right? And it's rapidly growing, but I'm building these relationships with people on a deeper level than just like, hey, like I remember this. I forget who it was. I wouldn't even want to say it anyway. They were like, hey, what's really cool? When you meet somebody on Facebook, you should totally just send them a video message of, hey, how you doing? Blah 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 blah.
Right.
And like they will feel super connected to you. And it's like, yeah, but it's vague and it's empty and it's hollow and it doesn't mean anything, because you're just doing it to like for the sake of like it'll stick in their mind. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? Like to think higher of you or something. Like actually take the time, talk to people and be genuine about your intentions and how you interact with them and what you want out of life and the interactions with those relationships, right? So like to me, that's more important than like, hey, I got 10 million subscribers. Like you could have bought them.
True.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What does it matter? Like the other thing is, like I've heard the story so many times. Like you get on the phone with them and they're like, well, we have like 500,000, subscribers to our show and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, I go back and do the research and I'm like, okay, well, here I can account for like 400,000 downloads, which is cool. Like, hey, that's congratulations. Like, I'm proud of you. You stuck with it long. And I'm not being like sarcastic about that. I'm being sincere, but like, it doesn't like, well, I don't know where you're getting 500,000 subscribers from if you only are hitting 400,000 downloads that's able to show publicly. Like, I guess they're coming from somewhere else, but even still, what difference does that make? Right. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I could see how podcasters, they're willing to try anything to get their show out there. They're willing to try anything.
Oh, I know. Well, there was Twitter bombing.
Yeah,
there was Twitter bombing. You remember Twitter bombing? I wrote a whole article about that because someone did that to my show, and I was furious because I'm like, how is this person getting so many more downloads than like some of the other much bigger names that I had on the show? And I went down a rabbit hole and found out, they have all these Twitter handles that are just tweeting out the direct download link to my show, and I'm like, like, and then you go on and it's like, I had 2 million downloads last month, and it's like, man, first off, you're making me feel like crap. Second off, if you have that many downloads, why are you not on Ellen? Like Steve Harvey, like you like, how have you not gotten their attention yet? Right? Like, things like that. And it's just like
Twitter also has those accounts that these people, I'm gonna say people in quotation marks, that always ask for podcast recommendations. Okay, and a lot of them are bots. So
I've seen a bunch of those, and I'm always wondering, like, why? Like, that just seems like an odd thing to keep tweeting out.
Yeah,
that's okay. So that's a rabbit hole I haven't go. So I've kind of have relinquished Twitter for the most part. Like we everything we post on our through our social media, it like goes out to the IndiePod Con. But I'm not like actively on there reading and interacting and all that. Like it's just I'm not there.
Twitter actually, if handled correctly, Twitter can actually be a great platform for podcasters. From my experience, there's a huge community. So I don't want anybody to get discouraged or anything, but
no.
Yeah, but you connect with other shows, like legit shows, one that aren't bots, and so. But so I think that's about it, Joe.
Awesome.
I'm out of questions. I told you that this would be a fairly quick episode. Thank you for tuning in today, everybody. I put together a free episode planning guide for you to make planning out your episode a breeze. So head on over to VodSquad.Live and get your free download. Also, right now, you can grab the Vodcasting on StreamYard Master Course. It's an in-depth class on how to vodcast, design assets for your live show, and setting up your social media accounts on StreamYard, and ultimately running your very first live show. I'll teach you the ins and outs of vodcasting so that you can look like a pro right off the bat. Don't forget to show your support for this show and consider subscribing. All the links to everything Joe is putting out are in the show notes. Joe, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a great time. Congratulations on the show, and hope that you continue to do it for years to come.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Or at least weeks. Get the weeks. Let's get to a couple weeks, right?
No, we're gonna keep going here.
Good. Glad to hear it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.